If these referred to spiritual speech, then there would have a potential contradiction with 1 Corinthians 11. I've said this so many times. Let me just keep moving. So in my opinion, 1 Corinthians 14, 34, and 35 must refer to disruptive speech, and therefore would not apply to the question of women in ministry. So I could stop the lecture now, we could all leave. But unfortunately for you, I have more slides. But basically, let's say that these verses are original. They would contradict 1 Corinthians 11 if they were saying that women can't be involved in ministering to the congregation in things they say. And therefore, that must not be what Paul means. It must refer to some other kind of speech, maybe chattering is the word that Blomberg uses, although he doesn't go with it. Textual issues, I've already mentioned this. Some manuscripts place these verses after verse 40. And here they are. I know you wanted to know that. This appears to be mostly texts in the West. However, Blomberg again, he says, some late manuscripts. Codex Visa, which is D, dates from the 400s. I'm sorry, that's not late as manuscripts go. Late manuscripts are 900s and 1000. And the italic manuscripts are a tradition that is pre-Vulgate. When was the Vulgate translated? The 400s. I'm sorry, that's not late. These are not late manuscripts. And the Vulgate, early 400s. As manuscripts go, these are not late manuscripts. Ambrosiaster is not late. I think he also dates from the 400s. So the manuscripts that have this verse displaced are not some kook, in the 800s came up with this. These manuscripts go back at least to the 400s, and italic implies even before that. You could argue that the Western Church had a text of 1 Corinthians that didn't have the verse in it, but they saw that all the other verses did, all the other manuscripts did, and so someone in the Latin tradition in the 300s goes ahead and puts it in at the end of the chapter. I mean, I can't prove that, but it's at least possible. So, where have I lost something? I want to read you the passage without the verses. The spirits of prophets are subject to prophets. For God is not a God of disorder, but of peace, as in all the assemblies of the saints. Or did the word of God go out from you alone, or meet you alone? If someone thinks to be a prophet or spiritual, let that person acknowledge that what I'm writing to you is the command of the Lord. I guarantee you would not have thought that something was missing from that if you had read it. You would not have thought to yourself, there seems to be kind of a break in the train of thought here. In fact, that flows a whole lot better than with the verses. We now interrupt this talk about prophets to talk about women. Women, be silent. Okay, now we resume the prophet talk. I mean, the verses come out of nowhere and disappear just as quickly. And there are a number of other hints, I think, that indicate that this is not likely to be original. So, for example, is it the church of Corinth or the churches at Corinth? No, it's the church. It's the church at Corinth. So, Corinth is a church, so why let women be silent in the churches? Corinth is not churches. So who's he talking to? You guys at Corinth? You go out and you stop women from talking in other churches. I mean, you see what I mean? There's a shift there from the people he's talking. It's like Paul said, like Paul's talking to you. You guys need to watch the way you're doing prophetic speech. And women, man, let them be silent in the churches. Like he just walked away from talking to the Corinthians and starts going on a tangent about how ticked he is that women talk in these other churches, other places. There's a discontinuity between who he's talking to, the church, singular, Corinth, and this talk about all the churches of God everywhere and the women in them and what a problem these women are being in all the churches. Man, we got to stop them from talking. It just doesn't fit the train of thought where he's talking to a singular church and then goes off on this tangent about all the churches where he wants women to be silent. Another tension is let them ask their husbands, or did the word of God go out from you alone? So he's talking to women. let women be silent, let women ask their husbands, and then he switches to a masculine plural. Or did the word of God go out from you alone? This is not, again, it's not a knockdown, it's not an end of the story kind of thing. But what we would expect, if this were a flow of context, is for the word alone to be feminine. Now, if you don't know Greek, everything has to have a gender. You can't have a word without a gender. It has to be either masculine, feminine, or neuter. And so, let women, feminine, be silent in the churches. Let them, feminine, ask their own husbands. Or did the word of God go out from you alone? Well, why has he stopped talking to the women and all of a sudden he started talking to the men? If these verses were original, we would expect the word alone more likely. I mean, it's possible. I mean, it's not evidence demands a verdict. But if this were original, I would expect the word alone to be feminine because he's been talking to the women. Let women be silent. Let the women ask their husbands. Or did the word of God go out from you women alone? Again, none of this is absolute proof, but it's why I think as a scholar that on balance it's more likely that these verses are not original. Can we really fit 14 with 11? I really don't think we can. I think that these verses are such a departure from what Paul says elsewhere that we really can't, they just don't fit in 1 Corinthians. It is shameful for a woman to speak in church. Why didn't he say that back in 1 Corinthians 11? I mean, he says it's a disgrace. I mean, it's the word here. It's a disgrace for women to speak in church. Really? You were talking in chapter 11 about women talking in church, and you didn't say anything about it being disgraceful. I just ultimately don't think that statement can fit with the rest of 1 Timothy unless Paul has certain women in mind. If you said, Paul, okay, the service is over, and you go up to Paul and say, you said that that it's a disgrace for women to speak in church. Well, what about Priscilla? If it's original, he'd have to say, I wasn't talking about Priscilla. I'm talking about Gaius' wife. I mean, she's such a distraction. Shut that woman up. I mean, if this is original, he has to be thinking about particular women or a certain type of women to where if you went up and asked him, he would say, no, I didn't mean Priscilla. What about Junius, the apostle? No, and I wouldn't talk about her. Well, what about Phoebe? No, I wouldn't. I mean, you see what I'm saying? Okay, maybe I didn't choose my words quite right.